Hey guys, it is Miss Durham, and I am back for another week of enrichment activities. This enrichment activity, it's called How to Tell Time, and this is something that's really great because you're going to be able to use this for a really long time. So if you haven't already, you should check out the enrichment activity that I've made. I've made a whole bunch of them this week again. You can find them in your Google Classroom, but this one actually has a worksheet with it. So let's take a look at how we're going to tell time. All right, so I know a lot of you already know how to tell time with a digital clock, right? Because that's what we see on computers and that's what we see on phones, is we can read it as 3:00, so 3 o'clock. Over here, though, is what we call an analog clock. And that's something that is really useful to know because your school, your class still has these analog clocks in them. And clocks are super important, right? Because they keep us on schedule, they keep us on routine. We can see how much longer we have of a certain time of the day. So if we didn't have clocks, imagine we could have like math for 4 hours a day or recess for only 2 minutes and we wouldn't know any better. So that's why clocks are really important. They keep us on schedule when we're doing things throughout our day. So let's take a look. A first thing we're going to do is I found this really useful video from this teacher, and we're going to watch it because it's got some really useful information in it, and it teaches us how to read clocks pretty quickly. So I'm gonna go ahead and start the video.
You will need some paper and pencil. This is a digital clock. We write the time in a digital fashion like this. This kind of clock is called an analog clock, and it's important that we learn how to read them. Most analog clocks have just two hands, a short hand and a long hand. This analog clock has a third hand, showing seconds. I have an analog clock here on my whiteboard, and I'm showing you the direction that it goes. This is called clockwise. The long hand starts at the 12 and moves around, and that shows an hour has passed. Here you can see it's 2 o'clock. When it makes a full circle, another hour will go by. The short hand is very important because it's the hand we start with when we're telling time. Here, the short hand is pointing to the 6. Here, the short hand is pointing to the 8. Here, the short hand is pointing to the 10. Sometimes the short hand will be between two numbers, and in that case, you have to think about when that clock went around clockwise, what did that short hand just pass? In the example I just showed you, it had just passed the 10. We've talked a lot about the short hand. What about the long hand? It's important too. When you're thinking about the long hand, you're going to start at the top of the clock. That always stands for o'clock, and then we count by fives. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, and 60. And you can't see what I'm doing here, but we never write 60 at the end of a time in digital form, so I'm going to cross that out. Instead, we always write those 2 zeros and we pronounce it by saying it's whatever hour o'clock. Just like 2 zeros represent o'clock, you have to have two numbers here. So we're going to put a 0 before the 5. Look at this digital clock. After the 2 dots, you will always see 2 numbers. Now that you have some background, it's time to tell time in 3 easy steps. First step.
Okay, so let's get back onto our actual lesson here. Those are really great. She did a really great job of explaining things. So we're going to take her steps and be able to read a clock with it, but I'm going to go over her steps with you. So first, I've written them down for you down here. So we have first step, second step, and third step. So our first step is to read the shorthand. The shorthand tells the hour. Okay, So as you're looking at this clock, tell me where the shorthand is. That's right. It's right here. This is the shorter hand of the two. And it is pointing directly at what hour? 3. Great. So we're going to go over here and we're going to write 3 because that comes first. The hour comes first. Our second step is to write the dots. Well, in this case, I can't write dots. I have to type them. So we're just going to keep it like that. And then after that comes the minutes. So we read the longhand to figure out the minutes. Now, in this case, we don't have our minute hand on different numbers. It's pointing directly at a certain number. And as you can see, it's pointing directly at what number? The shorthand's pointing at the hour and the longhand's pointing at what? It's pointing directly at the 12. Now, do I write 3/12? No, I don't. Do I count by fives like the teacher did and know that if it's pointing on the 12 that it's been 60 minutes? No, I don't do that either. If I'm pointing at the 12, it's actually starting over. So we're going to say it's exactly 0, 0. So it's exactly 3, 0, 0. But we don't say 3, 0, 0. We say 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock. 3, 0, 0 is 3 o'clock. Great. Let's move on and look at some other clocks. All right, so this one's the same thing. We're going to use our 3 steps. Where's our shorthand add on our clock to get the hour? That's right, our shorthand is pointing at the 7, so I'll write that first. Second step is to draw your dots, which I'm going to type it. And then we're going to look for our longhand. Oh, our longhand is pointing back at that 12. Not 3 12s, not 3 60s like she said in her video. It's 3 o'clock. 300. The timer is, it's like the 60 minutes that are in an hour are starting over. So we've gone 60 minutes already. All right, 7 o'clock. Let's move on to the next one, last one. Okay, this clock, I'm sorry, there appears to be something different. I don't see 2 hands on 2 different numbers. I see 2 hands pointing at the exact same number. So we're going to do exactly the same thing. Where is our shorthand? If they're both pointing at the same number, where is our shorthand pointing? That gives us the hour. That's right. So it's 12. Draw your dots. And if our longhand is also pointing at the 12, what should my minutes be? 0, 0. If the longhand is pointing at the 12, it should be 0, 0 as your minutes. Because as you can see on my clock, there's these little dashes in between these. That represents 1 minute. So if we were to count up all these dashes on our clock all the way around, we would count 60 dashes, which represents 60 minutes. But what people do, as she did in the video, is they count by fives. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60. But instead of saying 60, we say 0, 0, and we say it's 12 o'clock. Great. I think you guys got that. We always know when the longhand's on 12, it's 0, 0. The shorthand points to the hour. Simple and done, right? Okay, let's change it up a little bit. So we're going to review with the o'clock. If we have a clock over here and we know that our first step is the shorthand pointing at the 2, we know that the hour, I can't get that in there. Here we go. We know that the hour is 2 o'clock. And if the longhand, minute hand is pointing at the 12, what is it, guys? That's right. It's 0, 0. I already have my dots, but that's your second step and then your third step. Now over here, we have something a little different. Things have moved around. What happened? I don't know how to read this. You do know how to read this. We're still going to do the same exact steps. We know that our small hand over here, our shorthand, is the hour hand, and it's pointing in between 2 numbers. What do I pick? Well, it's either going to be 2 or 3, right? Well, here's how I do it. If the hand is in between 2 numbers, like the 2 and a 3, I always pick the number that comes before the other. So I know 2 comes before 3. So I know that the hour is actually 2 o'clock. right? So pick the smaller number of the two, which is 2. I hope that helps. So with this, it's going to be 2, the hour will be 2 o'clock. I've got to stop doing that. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, so the hour is 2. The second step is your dots. Third step is your minutes. Where's our minute hand? Yep, our minute hand is actually down here pointing to the 6. All right, how do I figure this out without counting all these little dashes? Well, in this particular case, you would look to see, you could count by 5s. Let's do that. We can count to 5s all the way to the 6, right? So 0, 0, 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Okay, right? So if I counted by 5s and the hand is on the 6, I know that the minutes are going to be 30. Here's how else you could look at this, which I would prefer. If there's 60 minutes in an hour, okay, 60 minutes in an hour, and the long hand is your halfway mark, and it's your long hand's halfway on the 6, halfway in between, it's going to be 30, because 30 is half of 60. 30 is half of 60. So if it's pointing, if your long hand is pointing on the 6, it is always going to be 30. So this clock is telling us that it's 2:30. Let's do a few more. Okay, first step, we're looking at our shorthand. Find the shorthand. Great, shorthand's in between the 11 and the 12. Remember, I'm picking my smaller number, which is the 11. 11 is our hour. And our longhand, oh look, our longhand is pointing at the 6. Remember what I said the 6 is always going to be? The 6 is always 30 because I'm counting by 5s. And there's 60 minutes in an hour, and 30 minutes is halfway, and 6 is always going to be 30 minutes. That's how you remember it. See if you can try this one over here. All right, find my shorthand to get the hour. It's halfway in between the 7 and the 6. Which one's the smaller number? That's right, 6 is our smaller number. And we're going to look at our minute hand. Our minute hand down here on the 6 again, on the halfway mark. I can count by 5s to get there, or I can actually just know that the long hand, when it's pointing at the 6, what time is it going to be? It's going to be 30. So 6 hours and 30 minutes, 6:30. All right, that is how we do half hour. This is called a half hour, or an hour like this one. Half hour and an hour, and this is something else that's real quick I'm going to tell you. So a lot of times you see that it says 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. How do we know 7 a.m. and 7 p.m.? Well, the a.m., when it says a.m. after the time, 7 o'clock, that is your nighttime. That's really, really late at night, like 3 in the morning. And then when you wake up in the morning, that's what the a.m. is. And the p.m. is actually like midday. So about 2 o'clock when you're getting ready to go out for recess, or you're having dinner with your family the evening, that's usually your p.m. So a.m. and p.m. So there's a bonus question. This isn't something I was actually teaching, but it's a bonus question on your enrichment activity. If you have any questions, the best person to reach out to would be your teacher, or there's lots of really great YouTube videos about it. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. We love you. We hope you stay safe. Klondike Bears, go Cards.